The Forgotten Prophecy. The obsidian tablets had been buried for 12,000 years beneath the crystalline sands of Kethmora, a dead world on the edge of known space. When the archaeological team from the University of Vega finally translated the ancient script, they discovered something that made their blood run cold. The tablets spoke of a species called the Silent Ones, beings who appeared weak but carried within them the power to reshape galaxies. Scholar Zindal of the Zerathi collective carefully examined the tablets through her compound eyes, her 6 arms working different translation matrices simultaneously. The warnings were clear. Beware those who speak softly but carry the thunder of dying stars. They shall come bearing gifts of peace, but their true nature burns brighter than 1,000 suns. When the Silent Ones awaken, the galaxy shall know fear. The discovery caused little more than academic curiosity. After all, the Zerathi had dominated space for 8 millennia, the reptilian Dragnari Empire controlled half the known systems, and dozens of other species had carved up the galaxy. Between them, what could some extinct civilization possibly know about modern threats? 3 months after the translation, humanity made first contact. The human ship that arrived at Nexus Station was modest by galactic standards, a simple diplomatic vessel called the Horizon's Promise. It carried only 50 crew members and requested permission to dock with what the aliens considered embarrassing politeness. The ship's hull was unmarked by battle scars, its weapons minimal, its design functional but unimpressive. Captain Elena Vasquez stepped onto the station's main concourse with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen much but spoke little. She was average height for her species, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. Behind her walked Commander Jonas Chen, a man whose calm demeanor masked years of military experience that no alien could yet comprehend. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with dozens of different languages as species from across known space gathered to witness this historic moment. Council leader Thexmar, a massive Dragnari whose scales gleamed like polished emeralds, looked down at the human delegation with barely concealed amusement. "So," Thexmar rumbled, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose people had conquered worlds before humanity had invented fire, "these are the famous humans we've heard whispers about. You certainly took your time reaching the stars." Captain Vasquez smiled politely, seemingly unperturbed by the condescending tone. "We believe in being thorough, Council Leader. We wanted to make sure we were ready." "Ready for what, exactly?" asked Counselor Vexith of the Phantom Syndicate, her ethereal form shifting like smoke. "You have no significant military. Your technology is centuries behind ours, and your territory consists of one small system. What could you possibly offer the Council?" "Knowledge," Elena replied simply. "And a warning." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter. The Dragnari roared their amusement, the Zerathi chittered in harmonic frequencies, and even the usually stoic Titan Confederation allowed themselves expressions of mirth. "A warning?" Thexmar wiped a tear from his massive eye. "From a species that hasn't even left their home system until recently? This should be entertaining." Elena's expression didn't change. She activated a holographic projector that displayed images of the obsidian tablets from Kethmora. These were found on 17 different dead worlds across the galaxy. All of them speak of the same thing, a species that will emerge from the outer rim, appearing peaceful, but carrying unimaginable power. "Ancient superstitions," scoffed Thexmar. "Every primitive culture has doomsday prophecies." "Perhaps," Elena conceded, "but these cultures existed at different times across 60,000 years of galactic history. They never had contact with each other. Yet they all describe the same beings, the same warning signs, the same eventual outcome." Scholar Zindal, who had been quietly observing from her position in the chamber's research section, spoke up with genuine curiosity. "What outcome do they describe, Captain Vasquez?" Elena met the scholar's multifaceted gaze. The awakening of something that was never meant to sleep, and the price paid by those who dismissed the warnings. The chamber fell silent for a moment before breaking into renewed laughter. Even Zindal seemed amused. her antennae twitching, with what Elena had learned was the Zarathi equivalent of a chuckle. "Well," Thexmar said, settling back into his massive chair, "we appreciate the entertainment, humans. The Council will consider your request for trade agreements and minor system recognition. You may return to your quarters." As the human delegation filed out, Elena caught Commander Chen's eye. There was something in her expression, not disappointment, but perhaps sadness, as if she had hoped, against all evidence, that they would listen. That night, as most of the station slept, the first disappearance occurred. The mining colony of Zarion 7 simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. The automated distress beacon never activated. The quantum communication array never sent an emergency signal, and the orbital defense platforms registered no hostile activity. One day it was there, producing rare earth, metals for the Draknari war machine. The next day there was nothing but empty space where a thriving colony of 50,000 beings had lived and worked. When the news reached Nexus Station, Thexmar was the first to speak. Pirates, he declared with certainty, probably the Ghost Fleet operating in that sector. But Scholar Zindal had pulled up the astronomical data. "Council leader, there are no jump signatures, no energy discharges, no debris fields. It's as if the entire colony was simply removed." "Impossible," snapped Councillor Vexith. "Matter cannot be simply removed from existence. There must be an explanation." Captain Vasquez, who had been summoned to the emergency session, stood quietly in the observation area reserved for non-council species. When asked for her opinion, she simply said, "Perhaps you should evacuate the outer rim colonies until we understand what's happening." "Evacuate?" Thexmar's scales flared with indignation. "Because of one isolated incident? The Draknari Empire does not flee from shadows." "Of course not," Elena replied softly. "We're just suggesting caution." 3 days later, 2 more colonies vanished. Then a mining fleet. Then an entire star system's population of 12 billion souls. The pattern was always the same. No distress signals, no signs of struggle, no evidence of what had happened. Entire civilizations were simply there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only empty worlds and the growing terror of those who remained. It was Scholar Zindal who first noticed the correlation. Working through the night in her laboratory, she had mapped every disappearance against the locations mentioned in the ancient tablets. The pattern was unmistakable. Whatever was taking these colonies was following the same routes described in the 12,000-year-old warnings. She requested an immediate audience with Captain Vasquez. "The tablets," Zindal said without preamble when Elena arrived at the scholar's quarters. "They don't just warn about the silent ones. They describe their path through the galaxy." Elena nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this conversation. "What do they say?" "That the silent ones will begin at the rim and move inward, taking those who refuse to listen. That they will give every species one chance to hear the warning, and those who laugh." Zindal's voice trailed off. "Those who laugh will be the first to fall." Elena finished quietly. "Captain." Zindal leaned forward urgently. "These disappearances are following the exact pattern described in the prophecies. Whatever's happening, it's not random, it's deliberate." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the viewport at the stars. Finally she spoke. "Scholar Zindal, there's something you need to understand about my species. We've been exploring space much longer than we've let on. Those colonies that are disappearing, we've been trying to warn them for years, but no one listens to humans." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that sometimes when diplomacy fails, other methods become necessary." Zindal felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. "The disappearances, your people are involved." Elena turned from the viewport, and for the first time, the scholar saw something in the human's eyes that made her step back involuntarily. It wasn't cruelty or madness, it was something far more terrifying. It was absolute certainty. "Scholar Zindal, humanity didn't just recently achieve faster-than-light travel. We've been watching this galaxy for centuries, studying every species, learning every strength and weakness. We tried to warn you peacefully because that's who we are. But the ancient civilizations that left those warnings, they knew something about humans that modern species have forgotten. Which is, Elena's smile was sad but unyielding. That when pushed too far, when ignored too long, when diplomacy fails and innocent people suffer because of arrogance and pride, humans don't just go to war. We become something else entirely. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Council Leader Thexmar's voice boomed over the communication system. All personnel to emergency stations. We are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Unknown vessels are approaching Nexus Station. Through the viewport, Zindal could see them emerging from what appeared to be empty space. Ships unlike anything in the galactic databases, sleek, dark, and radiating power signatures that made the station's sensors scream warnings. They moved with predatory grace, and even from a distance there was something unmistakably menacing about their approach. "Captain Vasquez," Zindal whispered. "What are those ships?" Elena looked out at the approaching fleet, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of inevitability. "Those are the consequences of not listening, scholar. The ancient warnings weren't about some mythical species from the past. They were about humans. About what we become when the galaxy forces our hand." As the first human warship powered its weapons and targeted the station's defense grid, Elena added quietly, "We really did hope you would listen." The awakening storm. The first shot from the human fleet didn't destroy Nexus Station's shields. It simply passed through them as if they didn't exist. The energy beam struck the station's primary communication array with surgical precision, severing the Council's ability to call for help without harming a single living being aboard. In the Council chambers, chaos reigned as alien species who had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly found themselves facing an enemy they didn't understand. Thexmar roared orders at his staff, while Councillor Vexith frantically tried to analyze the human ship's impossible technology. "Their weapons are passing through our shields like they're not there," reported the station's tactical officer, a nervous Zerathi whose antennae were twitching with fear. "Energy signatures are off the charts, but they're not matching any known weapon systems." Captain Vasquez had been escorted to the chamber under guard, but she walked with the calm dignity of someone who knew exactly what was happening. "Commander." Chen remained beside her, his hand resting casually on what the aliens had assumed was a standard sidearm, but now realized might be something far more dangerous. "Explain this treachery, human," Thexmar snarled, his massive claws extending as he advanced on Elena. "Your people dare attack a neutral diplomatic station?" "We're not attacking anyone, Council Leader," Elena replied calmly. "We're preventing you from making the situation worse. Those communication arrays would have sent distress signals to every military fleet in known space. Millions would have died in the resulting conflict. Millions will die anyway when we crush your pathetic species. Will they?" Elena asked quietly. "Have you looked outside recently?" Thexmar turned to the massive viewports that dominated one wall of the chamber and froze. Where moments before there had been empty space around Nexus Station, now hundreds of human vessels hung in perfect formation. They hadn't decloaked or jumped to the system. They had simply become visible as if they had been waiting there all along. But these weren't the modest diplomatic ships the aliens expected. These were warships of impossible design, their hulls seemingly absorbing light while energy patterns that defied known physics danced across their surfaces. Each one was easily the size of a Draknari battlecruiser, but they moved with the fluid grace of much smaller vessels. "Impossible," whispered Scholar Zindal, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "There are no energy signatures, no heat displacement, no gravitational distortion. It's as if they're not entirely in our reality." Elena nodded approvingly. "Very good, Scholar. You're beginning to understand." "Understand what?" Thexmar demanded. "That humanity has spent the last 500 years preparing for this moment." Commander Chen spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of a soldier who had seen things that would drive others mad. "While you were conquering primitive worlds and building your empires, We were building something else entirely. On the view screen, the lead human vessel began to broadcast on all frequencies. The image that appeared showed not Captain Vasquez, but a figure in a sleek uniform that bore no resemblance to anything the aliens had seen. Admiral Sarah Cross was tall even by human standards, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to contain the depth of space itself. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," Admiral Cross began, her voice carrying across every speaker on the station. "This is Admiral Sarah Cross of the Terran Defense Fleet. We come not as conquerors, but as guardians of a peace you have forgotten how to maintain." "Guardians?" Thexmar roared at the screen. "You're terrorists, pirates." Admiral Cross's expression didn't change. "For the past century, we have watched as your empire's enslaved species strip-mined worlds and ignored the suffering of billions in pursuit of power. We offered warnings. We tried diplomacy. We begged you to listen to wisdom that civilizations before you had died trying to preserve." The view screen split to show images that made several council members step back in horror. Worlds stripped bare of life, species driven to extinction, colonies disappearing not because of human intervention, but because of the Council's own wars and exploitation. "The colonies that have vanished," Admiral Cross continued, "have not been destroyed. They have been relocated to worlds beyond your reach, where they can rebuild their lives without fear of your exploitation. The mining operations that have disappeared were strip mining sacred sites. The fleets that have vanished were on their way to subjugate primitive worlds. You have no right," Thexmar began. "We have every right," Admiral Cross interrupted, and for the first time, her voice carried an edge that made even the mighty Dreknari leader step back. "Because we are what happens when a species learns that diplomacy has limits." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These weren't the fumbling primitives the Council had dismissed. These were the inheritors of 12,000 years of warnings, a species that had been preparing for this moment since before recorded galactic history. Scholar Zindal, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear, stepped forward. "Admiral Cross, the energy signatures your ships are producing, they're impossible according to our understanding of physics." Admiral Cross smiled, and it was not entirely human. "Scholar Zindal of the Zarathi Collective, your research into the obsidian tablets was quite thorough. You're correct. Our technology appears impossible because it operates on principles your civilizations abandoned long ago." "What principles?" "Unity," Commander Chen answered. "While your species fought wars and built empires, humanity took a different path. We didn't just develop technology. We developed ourselves." As if to demonstrate his point, Chen's form began to shift subtly. His skin took on a metallic sheen, his eyes glowed with inner light, and energy patterns began to flow beneath his surface. He was still recognizably human, but also clearly something more. "We are the collective," he continued, his voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that resonated through the station's hull. Human consciousness merged with quantum intelligence. Individual minds connected to a vast network of shared knowledge and purpose. We are what species become when they choose evolution over conquest. Thexmar, his warrior's instincts finally overriding his shock, reached for his plasma weapon. He never completed the movement. Between one heartbeat and the next, Commander Chen was across the chamber, his hand gently but firmly preventing the draw. The Dreknari leader, who had personally led armies across a dozen worlds, found himself completely unable to move. "Please don't," Chen said kindly. "Violence is unnecessary." "You're not human," Thexmar whispered. "We are more human than we've ever been," Elena corrected. "Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our weapons. It was our ability to adapt, to grow, to become more than we were. The ancient civilizations that left those warnings knew this. They saw what we could become given enough time and motivation." Admiral Cross's voice filled the chamber again. "Council Leader Thexmar, Councillor Vexith, honored members of the Galactic Council, you have a choice to make. You can continue down the path of empire and exploitation, in which case you will discover that the disappeared colonies were merely the beginning of our intervention. Or you can choose to evolve, to build something better. And if we refuse? Vexith asked, her ethereal form wavering with uncertainty. Admiral Cross was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then you will learn why 12,000 years of civilizations left warnings about humanity. Not because we are cruel or evil, but because when we decide something must change, it changes. Completely, permanently, and without exception. As if summoned by her words, the space around Nexus Station filled with light. Not the harsh glare of weapons, but something softer, more profound. Each human ship began to glow with patterns that defied description, geometric forms that hurt, to look at directly but somehow conveyed meaning beyond words. Scholar Zindal gasped as understanding flooded her mind. You're not just ships. You're alive. Everything is alive, Scholar, Elena said gently. That's what we learned when we stopped trying to dominate the universe and started trying to understand it. Our ships are grown, not built. Our weapons heal, rather than destroy. Our defense is evolution itself. The patterns of light spreading from the human fleet began to affect the station's systems, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of shutting down or exploding, the technology began to work better. Ancient systems that had been failing for decades hummed with new efficiency. The artificial gravity became more stable. Even the life support systems improved their output. We're upgrading your infrastructure, Commander Chen explained, noticing their amazement. It's what we do, we make things better. Thexmar, his warrior's pride warring with growing understanding, looked at the impossible scene surrounding them. What do you want from us? We want you to remember what you forgot, Admiral Cross replied. That the galaxy is vast enough for every species to thrive. That strength comes from cooperation, not conquest. That the ancient warnings weren't threats. They were invitations. Invitations to what? Elena smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it reached her eyes. To evolve, Council Leader. To become more than you are. To join us in building something worthy of the stars. The chamber fell silent as the council members contemplated their choice. Outside the viewports, the human fleet waited with infinite patience, their living ships pulsing with light that spoke of possibilities beyond imagination. Finally, Scholar Zindal stepped forward. If we choose to listen, if we choose to change, what happens then? Admiral Cross's expression softened. Then we begin the greatest adventure any civilization has ever undertaken. We explore the universe not as conquerors, but as gardeners. We nurture life instead of destroying it. We become the species the ancient ones hoped we could be. And if some species refuse? Thexmar asked quietly. Elena's expression grew sad but resolute. Then they will discover that evolution is not optional. The galaxy will grow and change, with or without their consent, but we'd prefer it be with their willing participation. As if in response to her words, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The disappeared colonies were reappearing, not where they had been, but on pristine worlds perfectly suited to their needs. Mining operations that had been strip mining dead worlds found themselves inexplicably relocated to asteroid belts rich with resources. Military fleets heading to subjugate primitive worlds discovered their navigation systems had redirected them to uninhabited systems where they could establish peaceful research stations instead. You've been doing this all along, Vexith realized. Not destroying, but redirecting, changing the galaxy one intervention at a time. We tried to warn you first, Elena said. We always tried diplomacy. But when civilizations refuse to listen, when they continue down paths that lead to suffering and extinction, we intervene. And now? Thexmar asked. Admiral Cross's image leaned forward slightly. Now you choose. Evolution or extinction. Growth or stagnation. A galaxy united in purpose, or the same endless cycle of war and conquest that has plagued known space for millennia. In the silence that followed, Scholar Zindal spoke for them all. Teach us. As the human fleet's light patterns intensified, washing over not just Nexus Station but reaching out to touch every world in the system, the ancient warnings finally made sense. They hadn't been prophecies of doom. They had been promises of transformation. Humanity had awakened, not as conquerors, but as gardeners of the galaxy itself, and the age of empires was ending, replaced by something far more wondrous: the age of evolution. The Silent Ones had spoken at last, and the galaxy would never be the same.